Delicious.
And I would definitely not eat rat patootie. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Cinema Psych Podcast, the podcast where psychology meets film. I am your host, Dr. Alex Swan, and today we're going to jump back into the Disney Pixar vault, this time with Ratatouille. Rat patootie, as Linguini said so eloquently while drunk. I love this movie. Not for rats cooking, but really the psychology is definitely rich in this movie, and it took rewatching it with that lens to really find it. And is it my favorite Disney Pixar movie? No, but it is a great story about, a character, rat, yes, in a people-driven world where the people and the rats don't actually communicate with one another like they do in other movies. But it is a character having a full story arc, which is brilliant, and I guess that's a hallmark of a Pixar movie. So that's, I guess, what I really like about it. Like I said, it's not my favorite, but I do like it. Of the many films within the Pixar vault, it is definitely up there toward the top. Now, this movie was directed by Brad Bird and Jan Pinkava, written by both Brad Bird and Jan Pinkava, as well as some additional input by Jim Capobianco. The film stars Patton Oswalt as the voice of Remy, our main character, Rat, who just wants to cook fine French cuisine. Brad Garrett plays the voice of Gusteau, who we actually don't see alive in person. We see a recording, and then he is the imaginary figment of Remy's imagination. He is a human chef who has a restaurant and quite a great assortment of fine dining. Lou Romano is the voice of Linguini. Now, you may not know who Lou Romano is, and that's fine. He doesn't have a lot of acting credits to his name, and most of his acting credits are voices. So he's a really good voice actor, to be honest with you, but he does not appear in live action as anyone, really. And I would say Alfredo Linguini, is his biggest voice acting role. Ian Holm plays Skinner. Brian Dennehy plays Django, Remy's dad. And so, of course, why not have the dad role played by Brian Dennehy? It's hilarious, by the way, that the order of these episodes have gone. Brian Dennehy as the dad in The Big Year, the previous episode that came out. So, what are we going to do? There's a finite pool of dad figures, I suppose. Peter Son, who is pretty much a Pixar guy, plays Emile, who is Remy's brother. Peter O'Toole, in I think one of his second to last roles, maybe Let me see here. 28. No. He didn't die that. Okay, never mind. 2013 is when he died. Okay. Janine Garofalo plays Colette, the love interest and chef of Linguini. Will Arnett is also a voice. John Ratzenberger, of course. This is an early Pixar movie, so of course he's there. James Remar is in it. You know, a few other people. Brad Bird typically does a voice, one off character does a voice in his movies. So, you've got Brad Bird. He plays Ambrister Minion. So those are the voice actors of Ratatouille. Now, some interesting tidbits that I wanted to share with you. They animated real rats, I suppose they used real rat. They didn't actually animate real rats. They used real rats as a basis for how the rats would move, so to speak, in this fictional animated space, which I think is pretty cool. The poster tells you how to pronounce Ratatouille, right? Just in case you were unclear about how to look at a French word and go, oh, that's how you say it. Yeah, no, Ratatouille. One piece of trivia that I find to be absolutely disturbing is, so toward the end of the film, when Remy is being chased and basically forced out of the restaurant because everyone knows that he's behind Linguini's rise to popularity, they stumble upon a storefront that has dead rats hanging in it from a number of traps, right? This is real. This is real. It is the window of destruction des animaux nuisibles. So, the destruction of nuisance animals, pests, right? An exterminator that has been around Paris since 1872. It's located on 8 Rue des Halles. Okay, I'm sorry. That's really bad French. I just mixed English and French there. I don't know how to pronounce things. I don't know what 8 is in French. I'm so sorry. But it's real. It's a real Paris storefront, and they modeled it in the movie, and that's scary. Now, the last bit of trivia, which is psychologically relevant. Okay, so it's a sight gag, and you might miss it, but because we're dealing with rats, and we're dealing with a guy who doesn't like rats, well, Skinner, voiced by Ian Holm, right? He's the antagonist of the story. Not so much a villain, but he just doesn't like rats, and he wants to make Gusteau's restaurant his own because he didn't like Gusteau, and he puts Remy in a box. Skinner, so named because of B.F. Skinner. Yes, Burris Frederick Skinner was the inspiration for the antagonist of the story. Skinner, rat, box, boom! Yeah, buddy. I love it. It's a great tie-in. And with that bit of trivia, let's jump in with our guest to talk about this movie. My guest host today is Dr. Shlomit Flaisher-Grinberg. Shlomit is an associate professor of psychology at St. Francis University in Pennsylvania, where she is also a co-coordinator of the interdisciplinary neuroscience minor and the coordinator of the Animal Assisted Health and Education minor/certificate program. She completed her Ph.D. in neuroscience at Tel Aviv University in Israel and her postdoc training at the University of Minnesota. Shlomit, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alex. I'm super excited to be here today.
I'm happy to have you on. It's been a while since we saw each other. I think we met in person in ACT, which is the annual conference on teaching put on by the Society for the Teaching of Psychology in Pittsburgh, I think is where we met in person. How have you been since then? That's been a while. It's been a few years.
Yeah, it's been a while, but it's been good years, and it's great to be here today. It's good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about Ratatouille. First, I want to get your thoughts on the movie in general. What do you think about the fact that a rat is cooking high French cuisine? What do you think?
Well, I love the movie. I really think it's one of these movies that you can watch no matter how old you are or where you are in your life right now. It's the
Yeah.
one that you're like watching and you find yourself smiling.
Mm-hmm.
It touched on really cool themes of animal and animal behavior
Yep.
and cooking and food, which is one of my absolute favorite topics.
Yes. Well, I can't wait to hear more about the cooking part, and I think we can definitely make that our first segment. Is definitely the cooking aspect, since it is a big portion of the movie. What did you think of the voice acting? Patton Oswalt, a good selection for Remy.
Yeah, I think he's a great selection. I honestly love Peter O'Toole. I
Okay.
believe he plays Ego, who's
Mm-hmm.
the critic. I
So
just love the
correct.
way I love everything that he does. So I thought the voice actors were amazing.
Yes, and interestingly, Ian Holm plays the antagonist Skinner, and he puts on a French accent, which I think is great. But like nobody else does in the movie. Maybe
Hmm.
Colette, maybe
Yeah, a little
Janine
bit.
Garofalo a little bit, Colette, but like nobody else does.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it, but yeah, I agree.
I'm wondering if that was a conscious choice to make the French guy the bad guy. He's not really a villain. He's definitely just, an ambitious old man who doesn't like rats. And, to be fair, who wants a rat in their kitchen, right?
Oh, I do.
You want a rat in your kitchen. Okay, fair
Oh
enough.
my gosh, I love rats.
maybe make sure that they're not, doing their business near your food, right?
Oh, if you can, yeah.
If we can save that. Okay. So
Yeah, maybe.
so we were going back and forth. I wanted you on the show, and we were going back and forth for a couple of months on what movies to choose that would hit at your research expertise. So explain to the listeners what your research background is, the kinds of courses you teach, and then sort of what brought you to Ratatouille.
Sure. So I'm a neuroscientist by training.
Mm-hmm.
I study the way that our brain develops and degenerates across our lifetime, the way that the environment and genetics interact, and it comes to our behavior.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, and with my background in neuroscience and a lot of my, I guess, research into the neurobiological underpinning of psychiatric conditions,
Okay.
I got to teach some courses at the university that I'm in right now that are connected to my background. I teach learning, which is the field that explores the effect of experience on our behavior, sensation and perception, which deals with the way that we sense, but also construct the world around us, and biopsychology, which connects the biological, genetic, physiological fields of our behavior with our psychology.
Yeah.
So Ratatouille connects to a lot of my background, knowledge, or research to my current teaching and interest in many ways. I think the first thing that it does is really focus on the field of sensation and perception.
Sure.
Which deals with the way that we experience the world simply through our senses. So light that is converted to vision, and air molecules moving in the environment converted to sound, and chemical molecules that we taste and we smell. But it also focuses a lot on the way that we infuse ourselves, our expectations, interpretations, our memories into sensations, and that gives us perception.
Right.
So the movie really revolves around the smell and the taste and flavor that give rise to our ability to enjoy cooking. But it really does give us a little bit of a glimpse into how memories and emotions affect the way that we really sense the world.
There's far more detail about this, but like at the end, Ego and eating the ratatouille, which is, according to many people in that kitchen, a very simple French dish. Like, it's very pedestrian and boring. But Remy believes that Gusteau's recipe plus a little bit of himself can make it really good, and it brings Ego back to his childhood, which is makes the ending of the movie a nice crescendo for all of the main characters like Linguini and Remy. Yeah, I think that the movie, if you weren't psychologically minded like you and I are, then I don't know if you would catch that, but it certainly is an aspect of sensation and perception that you have to explore, especially when you talk about the chemical senses like smell, and which smell has a direct connection to memory more than taste does, but taste certainly does as well, because you and I both know that, one bad experience with taste can lead to a lifetime of avoidance.
Right.
So this is it's an incredibly powerful taste aversion. It's an incredibly powerful movie in that respect. So let's jump into the taste and we'll start, I guess, with taste within sensation and perception here. Now, I want to ask you, before we jump into the movie's depiction of sensation and perception, and again, taste and smell, because we're dealing with cooking, a flavor, the combination of the two, I wanted to ask you, when you teach sensation and perception, do you spend most of the term talking about vision? Yeah.
About half a semester go to vision.
Yeah.
About a quarter goes into auditory sensation and perception, and the rest of it we just run through.
Yeah, you cram it in.
Yeah.
I feel like this recording here, this episode about Ratatouille, and a couple of episodes I did another movie called Perfect Sense, which is also about cooking and the loss of sense. But the first part of the movie is really focused on cooking, which is, smell and taste again, and flavor before people start losing their hearing and their vision. I definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it. But I think it's interesting here that we've got two films closely connected to each other. One's animated, one's not, of course, that really focus on the sensation and perception of eating and food. And we spend, 2 weeks on these two things out of 16?
Yeah.
Sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, literally one class section for each one.
Right? It's really it's really abominable when you think about it. But of course, we know so much about, or we want to explain so much about vision, which is our primary sense as a species. But come on.
Mm.
So when it comes to smelling and tasting, what are some of the aspects of those two things does this movie do well?
I think it does a really good job showing differences between different organisms, different individuals, as to both their sensation and perception of taste and smell. So if we're talking about taste, for instance, there are some huge differences between people in the way they sense the sense of taste. We have some basic taste receptors. We have ones for saltiness, for bitter, for sweet, for sour, umami, probably. And people are very different in one another in both the numbers of these receptors that they have, and also the types of the receptors, even their distribution across their tongue and their mouth. So interestingly, for instance, across people, we have about 30 different types of bitter receptors.
Wow.
Which means, which means that we can taste different types of bitter. Some bitter only activate one or two receptors. Some activate a complex of these receptors.
Okay.
But I think that we can hypothesize that nature gave us so much sensitivity to bitter because in our evolution, bitter used to predict poisonous food.
Sure.
Now, sweetness, on the other hand, is presumed to only activate a very small number of receptors, maybe one or two.
Oh, wow.
So for us humans, sweet is sweet. And
Yep.
sweet is probably good for us. It's high calorie, high fat food that's going to get us through the winter.
Mm-hmm.
While bitter can be dangerous to us.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing is that people vary in their genetics to these receptors with a huge effect on bitter.
Okay.
So there are some bitter receptors that some people have a lot of, and they'll be super sensitive to bitter. There are some people who just taste bitter, and there are some people who may have less sensitivity to bitter, meaning that they may enjoy bitter food like wine and coffee and dark chocolate. Yeah, in class, actually, we demonstrate that.
Right.
There are some compounds that can activate beta receptors, and PTC, that has a long, complicated name. It's phenylthiocarbamide, is only activating very specific set of receptors, which are activated by a single gene or encoded by a single gene.
Single gene. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. And people can either have none of these receptors, some of them, or a lot of them. And if we dip just a piece of paper into PTC and I let my students taste it without even telling them what's happening, and they trust me enough to actually taste it, we find that some people react to it with horror. They just touch it to the end of the tongue and they just immediately show the aversion response. Some are kind of like, oh yeah, it's bitter. Some people are like, I only taste paper. I'm included, by the way. And it is genetic, so it is an hereditary component, hereditary trait. But it's really surprises students. They do it really early at the beginning of the semester, even though we get to taste at the end.
Yeah.
Just to really demonstrate how different we are from one another at the way that we sense the world around us.
How many people would you say in a given class, maybe percentage wise, since I would say I would imagine your class size varies from year to year. How much would you say are the what we would call super tasters, the people who have the really explicit aversion to the PTC?
I believe that the assumption is that across the population, there are about 30% super tasters.
Okay.
And this is about the number I usually find in my class.
Okay. Interesting.
I always
consider it, and interesting because your students at St. Francis are probably not a representative sample, right? When you think about it, because they're from a small region within a small place on the entire globe, and yet you still end up with about the same population to sample ratio, which I find to be incredibly difficult to achieve.
My students, always the ones who are super tasters, are always so encouraged to discover the really genetic basis of their food preference. Some of them, always heard that they're picky eaters, or they always were surprised by their lack of interest in some specific food. And I think it makes them, or it makes them feel a little bit better about the way they taste the world, because it really grounds it up to their biology and to their genetics.
Something that that just popped into my head about that revelation, to me, that feels a lot more revelatory to a person's existence than a personality test like the MBTI or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it feels like that was truly something this person did not know about themselves, rather than some reflectory test that they took online or something like that. So yeah, I love that. And in the movie, we see two different people, well, characters, I suppose, embody that, right?
Yeah. So thank you. This is where I was going at. We can see really early in the movie, Remy is tasting food. And in fact, he closes his eyes and he gets completely submerged in the experience.
Mm-hmm.
We see some lights, we see some colors. So now that I'm thinking about it, I'm almost thinking synesthesia, which is a completely different topic. But he really he smells the food and he knows what's in it and what's missing and how to modify it. And then there is I believe this is his brother.
His
Emil.
brother, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Emil just eats it, and we can see a tiny bit of color disappears and a little bit of light, but he really does not experience it the way that Remy does.
Right.
Which also explains his food choices and his approach to food, which is completely different than Remy's approach. But it does give us a really quick glimpse into really the way that probably different people experience different tastes, different smells.
Right. And there's a later scene where he finds Remy again, because Remy had been helping Linguini in the restaurant and was separated from his family. And they find each other again, and Emil's just like eating some garbage, and Remy's like, I don't understand how you can do that. And it's like, it's food. We eat other people's garbage. And I think having younger kids. I have a son who is 11 and a daughter who is 8, and they certainly have developed their pickiness, and you can kind of see them forming their eating habits in real time, which is quite interesting. And one of the things that we try to do along that front, Emil eating trash, and, Remy being like, why are you okay with that? Kind of global existential question for him and his pack of rats is the phrase, don't yuck another person's yum, right? Have you heard that phrase before?
I have not. And I must have missed it in the movie too, but I love it.
Oh, no, it's not in the movie. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But it is sort of like it is definitely the message behind that interaction, or many interactions between Remy and his family and the pack of rats that he hangs out with. It is, don't yuck another person's yum. So you may not like it, but they definitely do. So you can't, because that's putting your own biases on that other person's likes, and your dislike is not necessarily their dislike, that kind of thing. And so that's what we're trying to promote with our kids, is don't yuck another person's yum. Do you have any experience with the different kinds of beyond the bitter PTC? Do you have other things in the taste realm? So as we explore how Remy helps Linguini basically rise to prominence, but then he realizes that, he's playing a farce. What other kinds of differences do you see in the movie? Maybe the interaction between smell and taste.
I think that if we are talking about that, it really does bring us a little bit into the perception realm, which is the way that we infuse our learning history and our knowledge, and also our expectation and even our learning and culture into how we experience food. So not to say that any food really is yuck. It's really interesting to realize that some foods or some substances can be considered edible in some places of the world, in some cultures, in some families, while in other cultures, places of the world, these components really are considered unedible.
Yeah.
So we learn through our culture and our heritage and our family what to eat, how to eat it, and also when to eat it.
Right.
Which has a huge effect on our perception of food. So I do like in my class to have my students think about the food that their culture eat,
Right.
their family eats. And when we compare it to one another, some students would be like, oh, I would never eat that. But some do.
Right.
Some, there are places in the world when you can eat worms and you can eat frogs. If we're talking about the French cuisine,
right?
Frogs
Exactly,
and
escargot
snails
and snail. Exactly,
and things that are considered a delicacy, even though I don't necessarily know if I would eat it.
I think it's purposeful too that Brad Bird chose French as the cuisine presented in the movie, because it is perhaps, at least in the Western world and Western adjacent world, as the top cuisine. But you have those interesting, I guess, non-Western ideas floating around there, like escargot or snails or caviar, like fish eggs, right? So it is quite interesting that we raise the bar, so to speak, to French cuisine, and yet your students and mine included, you've got your northeastern population in Pennsylvania. I've got my Midwestern population, and I think there would be very similar choices about what is yuck versus what is yum.
Yeah. And a lot of time we learn what is yuck and what is yum, and that changes the way we perceive it.
Yeah, and what we're exposed to too. Like, so I could imagine a family in the Midwest who eats, Polish delicacies to be more open to related foods than many generations removed, maybe Polish heritage family, but doesn't eat those kinds of things, and would find the idea of eating a Polish delicacy to be abominable.
I really love to bring some of the food that my culture and background really eat to class, and offer an opportunity for students to try it. Some like it, some don't, and that's fine.
What's an example of something that you would bring to class?
So I bring it's really hard to explain. It's peanut puffs.
Okay.
I'm guessing it is like a snack. And it's literally peanuts.
Okay.
That's been puffed into like a little bit like cheese puff, but peanut puff.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and they are delightful.
They are.
Yes.
They are. They called bamba.
Okay. I did not know what they were called, but yeah.
Super, super common snack in Israel. They kind of like melt in your mouth, so you can even give them to younger kids, and they literally just taste like peanuts.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I bring Turkish Delight.
Okay.
I don't know if you know that.
Yep, I'm familiar with them. I do not like them myself. As far as like really rich sweet things tend to be my base is ice cream, and then I kind of like take a step back.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really eat cakes or things like that, but yes, my wife loves Turkish Delights.
And it's interesting you mention it, because Turkish Delight activate different type of receptors. So it actually is sweet, and it's a little bit bitter, and it's a little bit, I'm guessing it's a little bit salty sometimes because there are nuts in it, but also it does have a very strange texture, which some people who are more sensitive to the texture may find either appealing or unappealing.
Right. And that's a good part of flavor too. Is flavor is the combination of smell, because we get a lot of aroma and odor molecules go up into our nose from foods, right? Things that pop off into the air from the food itself. And we get flavor, of course, as we've discussed, you're sour, you're sweet, you're bitter, etc. But then flavor is also mouthfeel as well, as what I call it, mouthfeel, because not only does mouthfeel have texture associated with it, but then when you bite down into it is what I also include in mouthfeel, right? So texture, what does your tongue, what does it feel like to your tongue? But then what happens when you chew it? Right? When you start masticating, which of course for quite a few foods you have to do before you can swallow it. And so we talk about this in my sensation and perception class. We do a food potluck at the end of the semester. So I tell them to, bring their favorite food, not necessarily a, food from their family or from their culture or something like that, because I'd probably get a lot of the same dishes if I did culture. But I ask them to bring their favorite foods, and then they come up to me one at a time, and for extra credit, I ask them to tell me about its flavor, right? So they have to hit on odor, right? And aroma. They have to hit on taste, obviously, like what are the components, what are the things that I'm going to taste when I put this in my mouth, and then mouthfeel, so texture and chewing. And so it varies, of course, what they bring and how they describe it. But I am I'm very sensitive to the mouthfeel of something squishy, right? So I tend to stay away from slimy things that are relatively that look slimy, that would feel slimy in my mouth, and that would have this is gonna just, it's for auditory medium that this podcast is, the squish, the kind of feel. I'm just like, nope, count me out. If that's what's gonna do in my mouth, count me out of it.
But you like crunchy.
I do enjoy crunchy. Yeah? Crunchy would be fine as long as it tastes okay, right? So crunchy would be excellent. Breads and things that have like the kind of like the smooth bite down, that kind of thing. Yeah. Which I think is interesting, going back to the movie with Ego eating the ratatouille at the end, which to me, ratatouille, the way that they describe it in the movie, I've never had ratatouille before. Have you had ratatouille before?
I have not.
It apparently is, sliced vegetables in a arranged together in some kind of sauce.
Yeah, that's how it looks like.
That like
seems tomatoes maybe, and like potatoes, maybe carrots, and
yeah. Very slices of various vegetables, but that's all it is. It's a vegetable dish with a sauce on it. And based on the description, it does look very bland and pedestrian, right? It looks very basic. But as Ego eats it at the end, of course, this is the Gusteau plus Remy version. He eats it, and it takes him back to his childhood when he was eating his mother's cooking.
Yeah.
What? I am making ratatouille. Well, how would you prepare it?
Ratatouille. That opportunity to jump into how food perception, how taste and flavor and all of that stuff takes us back to our memories.
There are definitely connections across our brains between taste and smell areas and memory areas, where memories are stored across our brain. And I think we can all have or think about examples when either a memory bring us back to think about the food that is connected to it, or the food that brings back the memory. So associative learning enable us to learn what to like or dislike, I guess, because we associate the food, the smell, the taste, the flavor with the experience. So it could be that, we eat a certain food or experience certain food in a scenario that has high emotional value for us.
Yeah.
That we really like, we enjoy. Maybe it's a first date. Maybe it's a food that we eat on a trip somewhere. Maybe it's just a beautiful day outside. And these emotional experiences actually enhance not just the way we sense and we smell the taste, the food, but also enable us to form these connections across our memory, across our brain, between the food and the experience, where we've been, what we've seen, how we felt about that.
Right.
this can be the basis for food preference, for instance. Now, of course, you mentioned taste aversion, which is the similar yet horrible example, because it can happen to us that we eat something and it actually makes us sick or brings some sort of sickness. And now the sickness is associated with the food.
Yeah.
And now we cannot stand the food anymore. We cannot see it. We cannot smell it. We cannot taste it. The sad thing about taste aversion is actually that it can develop even if it's not the food itself that made us sick.
Right.
We were already somewhat sick and we ate something. And the way that our body and our memory works, now the sickness predicts the food predicts the sickness. This is pretty much classical conditioning.
Yeah.
And our aversion to sickness now is exhibited to the food. And again, we may never eat this food again. In fact, that learning can be generalized.
Yeah.
And we may never go to that restaurant again. We may not even be able to look at that food ever again.
Right.
And it's really hard to break. This learning is incredibly strong. So it's actually a lot easier for us to learn about things that can hurt us, can pain us, can scare us than things that are good for us. So aversive or taste aversion can be long lasting. It can last across our entire lifetime, even if it only occurred to us once.
Right. I mentioned this in the previous episode on Perfect Sense, the film, but my taste aversion, and so I'm going to give you a chance, Shlomit, to think of yours because it's share time. So mine. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and the Pacific Ocean wasn't too far away. The Pacific Ocean at that point is very cold. The California current comes from the Gulf of Alaska, basically. And it's very cold water. And for smells, cold things hold on to odor very well, right? Because hot air moves very quickly, and so it doesn't hold on to smells that well because it just dissipates very quickly. But cold air holds on to smells really well. And I think this is where my aversion comes from. So I do not like seafood at all because seafood to me tastes like it smells, which of course to many people who like seafood is the point. But to me, the way the sea smells is disgusting because it has that cold water rotting smell to me, like it holds on to the stench. And I use stench importantly there because to me, the Pacific Ocean in California, especially Southern California, but also Northern California, smells gross. It is very pungent and I don't like it. And then so that smell is transferred to the food. And so when I taste it, right, it's that flavor combination, right? So salmon itself seems very bland and it is meat shaped and it looks like beef or whatever. And it has relatively the same texture as chicken, I suppose. But because it comes with that smell, can't eat it. And I recently tried a couple of years ago. My wife and I went to a hibachi restaurant and she ordered combo plate. With chicken and salmon, I think, and I got chicken and steak. And I was like, you know what? I'll give it a try. It's been grilled, it's been seasoned. Let's give it a go. And I took a bite and I was like, nope, absolutely not. I mean, I swallowed it. I didn't spit it out or anything, but I'm like, nope, that just affirms my dislike for that. And it goes all the way back to just the smell of the ocean not being pleasant.
That's so interesting.
What is your taste aversion?
Well, I don't have one.
Oh, what?
I know. Well, here's the thing. I love food.
Okay.
And I would pretty much try anything once.
Uh-huh.
I guess that if we're going back to sensation of taste, I have very not sophisticated palates.
Okay.
Across all the bitters we try in class, I don't taste any of them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I love bitter food. I actually like really like the sense of food. So I do eat, like I love noodles because they are
Yeah.
kind of crunchy, I guess. Because I don't taste a lot of the food, I do like the other capacities that
Okay.
comes with it. So I love spicy food because
Yes.
spicy activate heat and I can taste it.
Yep.
Or crunchy food, or I like gummies.
Mhm.
So it's like all the food that you don't necessarily just taste and smell, but you can also like feel it, I guess.
Mhm.
So for me, I would try any food at least once when I was in Thailand.
Mhm.
We did 8 worms, and
Oh wow, okay.
Yep, don't let anyone fool you. They say they taste like chicken, or nope, they really do taste like worms, exactly like you think worms would taste like. And crickets and other kind. I would try it, and I have not yet found food that I really dislike,
Okay.
but I really try. I would try. I would eat any really. I do love the smell of the sea because I grew up on the Mediterranean.
Sure.
And
Okay.
it
Warmer
smells
water. I think it's very important that it's warmer water for sure.
Warm water, salty water.
Mhm.
You can go down and smell all the fish. In fact, every time I go into a fish store or a store that sells a lot of the seafood, it
Yeah.
throws me back to my childhood on the Mediterranean. A little bit like, Ego in the movie.
Mhm.
So I'm still waiting for the taste aversion to develop.
So no aversion from getting sick, maybe foodborne illness that prompted a hatred. Not that you can remember, maybe.
None that I can remember. I mean, definitely ate food that made me sick.
Yeah.
But maybe just because a lot of time, if you have the same food experience with many other associations that didn't make you sick,
Okay.
then it's buffers that new learning.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I can see where like 10 pluses outweigh 1 minus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
haven't happened yet.
Fair enough. I like exploring this kind of stuff on a personal level with people. It's a discussion that I tend to devote a good portion of class time to when we get to taste and sensation and perception, because one thing, it gets the students, talking about stuff as opposed to just like passively listening to information. And so I share my personal thing, and I'm like, all right, guys, let's go. What are yours? And so they jump in with some of theirs. And I think it's a great conversation because you will learn a lot about people and what they like and what they dislike just based on having a bad experience or multiple bad experiences with food. And that's it. And food is a central part of our lives because we need to have it. We need to do it to stay alive.
And it does give students opportunities in my class too to share their experiences of food preference and taste aversion.
Yeah.
It also brings a little bit back of the associative learning to the table, and also observational learning.
Yeah.
Because we do learn by observation from other people how to feel about certain stimuli and how to react.
Yeah.
So some students sometimes share that they actually learned food aversion not through their own experience with the food, but through someone else's experience with the food. Very similar to how we may learn fear.
Yeah.
Or again, we learn what to like and how to consume some foods by observing other people doing that. So I always tell my students that, we have a hummus plate and you have a pita bread, but you really don't take the fork and use the fork to put it on the pita. You're really supposed to break the pita and use it as your fork to eat it. This is really the cultural way to consume it.
Right.
And we learn that through observation, how to eat the food and when to eat.
Yeah, just like pizza, right? So bringing it to the United States, right? Quite a few people are castigated, ridiculed for eating pizza with a fork and a knife.
Right.
Because this is your true American handheld food, and you
Right.
must
So
eat
if you're
it.
coming from the culture, you're like, oh no, what are you doing? You
Yeah.
can't do it like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Grabbing a knife or a fork and spreading your hummus on the pita is no. You're gonna get stares.
Yeah, you're like, no, that's not. You can't enjoy it like this. This is not enjoyable.
Right.
Or I can think about cutting spaghettis or noodles. Yeah,
exactly.
You're not supposed to do that.
No, the film is about this the expression of oneself through cooking, through food, through taste. But I want to pivot to our characters. Many of our characters in the movie, you have quite a bit of experience with rats in your life, right? Your professional life. And you say that they have a bad reputation. I think the reputation is somewhat earned in the sense that they can carry disease, and they were one of the vectors for a big plague that went through Europe. Well, but as far as their lives, not earned, right? So what about their bad reputation, disease vectors notwithstanding, is unearned in your experience?
Well, I find that a lot of people just dislike their tails. I don't get it, but it's okay. Some people say that their scaly, hairless tail freaks them out, or they have these tiny little paws. They have this little cute nose. I'm not sure. I know that, of course, they do run on the floor, so their paws are dirty. Um, Interestingly enough, although they do have that perception of being dirty animals, rats are actually extremely clean.
Yeah, they clean themselves quite a bit.
They clean themselves a lot. They clean one another.
Yeah.
If you touch them, that they'll be like, "What are you doing, you dirty human?" And
yeah,
they
right.
clean themselves after you touch them. And they really are really great organism around us for many, many reasons.
Yeah, and I think they do get a bad rap for most of their lifestyle, right? Of course, disease vectors. Now, a lot of animals are disease vectors that don't get the same kind of bad rap, right? So we've HIV, for example, started in simians, right? In primates, right? And it made the hop. COVID, most recently, right, may have began in a bat, jumped a couple of species to humans, right? So maybe bats do get the same kind of bad rap, but primates don't, right? So, but we use rats in research, and I want to pivot to your experience with rats in research, because in the movie Skinner, so named because of our very famous behavioral psychologist, Burris Frederick Skinner, B.F. Skinner, puts Remy in a box. Of course, this is a reference by Brad Bird to the operant conditioning chamber that Skinner created or helped create. So there's a lot of connections there, but I want to move beyond Skinner, and because he tended to like to use pigeons anyways. So I want to move beyond Skinner and explore how the humans interact with the rats in this movie based on your experience with doing this kind of research, Shlomit.
A lot of the research that can integrate rats into it is the traditional learning research that studies how they learn and remember, mazes, lever pressing, effects on the brain, so neurogenesis in the brain, the birth of new neurons and connections within the brain. And rats are a really good model for neurobiology because they are relatively easy to maintain. They're actually a lot of time in the lab. They're very docile. They're very gentle.
Okay.
They procreate. They're not expensive. And they are a great model for behavior and for neuroscience. So,
Okay.
for instance, research has shown that when rats are raised in an enriched environment and they are provided with opportunities to experience the world around them, their brain develops, new neurons are born, neurons make new synapses, the brain becomes more elaborated. And these effects on the brain also have an effect on their emotions and behaviors. These rats become more resilient to stressors later down the road. Now, this, of course, is incredibly, the translation of this research to human is easy to see if we're thinking about the way we are raising our children or the experiences that we get across our lifetime, and how important it is, not just for our neurological development, but also to our emotional and cognitive and social development. It actually has been shown lately. This was not the point of the research, but the lab of Kelly Lambert, for instance, taught
oh my gosh,
rats
I'm so glad you are
I know,
please.
I love
Oh
it.
my gosh.
So they taught rats to drive tiny little cars. Now, these cars are not complicated. The rats just have to make choices that take the cars forward or backward or do some maneuvers. But it is incredibly entertaining. And also, it does show that rats can learn these tasks with the immediate effect on their brain and on their behavior. Now, I will tell you that another lab, this is in Israel, taught goldfish to drive little cars.
Goldfish driving little cars.
Goldfish.
Submarines, I guess, is what we'll call them.
I know, because if you can put their aquarium again on that little car, they can learn to touch different parts of the aquarium to go forward and backward.
So they were driving cars from within their little fish
within
bowls.
The aquarium.
Okay,
exactly.
wow.
But again, this research is not necessarily dedicated to understand how rats can learn, but it's more focused on the neurobiological mechanisms that are involved in learning and also the effect of experience on our behavior.
Yeah.
Now, I worked with rats for many years. I trained rats to press levers and run mazes. So when I had the opportunity to teach the learning course in my university, of course, I brought rats with me. I really wanted my students to get to know rats because, again, they're actually very social. They're very friendly. They're very clean. I've never been bitten by a rat in my entire life, and I worked with rats for about 20 years. I wanted students to really learn to take care of them too and maintain them, not just to, in a scientific fashion, use them. And I wanted students to be able to translate these classical operant conditioning to the training of the rats. But also I didn't want them to just train the rats to press levers. I wanted them to think outside the Skinner box. And for many years, my students used to train their rats to do some really cool stuff. So rats can learn to play basketball and play soccer and ride little tiny scooters. And of course, they can learn to, one group actually trained their rats to walk in that hamster ball. So they can get places.
Interesting.
And,
so using the ball as a wheel that is movable, right? That goes from point A to point B. Oh, very interesting.
So a lot of really fun, active and application-based learning that you can do when you work with rats in the classroom.
So to connect that to the movie, one thing that I really like about the film choices, right, the filmmaking choices, is that the rats, while they are anthropomorphized amongst themselves, there is no connection between the human world and the rat world. They are still a giant chasm apart as far as communication goes, right? Linguini doesn't know that Remy is called Remy, right? He just calls him Little Chef, and that's it. He can see that Remy understands English, but it's entirely possible that other animals can learn to at least one-sided communication. Maybe it's a bit far-fetched for a rat to know how to read writing, but certainly can understand what animals can understand what humans are saying to them. At the very least, we have plenty of evidence of that. Across different animals, not just looking at dogs or cats or chimps or whatever, but like across species of animals. So I don't think it's too far a bit of a stretch. And then talking about your vehicle study from Kelly Lambert, that Remy drives Linguini on his head. Like, he's driving Linguini. He's using Linguini as a vehicle, so to speak, with levers. He's essentially using Linguini as a mech suit, right? A big robot suit that he runs around. It is, of course, a biological squishy mech suit, but a mech suit nevertheless. And I think it's really cool that they can do all of these things. Rats can do all of these things and have been observed in the laboratory. They have not learned how to cook yet, though.
Yes.
Could you teach a rat to cook? Something simple. Well, we won't start with Ratatouille, of course.
I believe that you can probably train a rat to like hold a little pan and a little spoon, maybe move them around. I've had students who train their rats to pick up their toys back into their box so they can move
so
things
cute.
around. Yeah, probably that. I don't know about real cooking, and I would not want the rat to handle fire in any way too. So probably not. But
they probably would get over a really inborn innate fear of fire.
Yeah, I would not do that, right? But it is interesting you mentioned that he drives Linguini because early in the movie he seems to be doing it for himself. I mean, he wants to cook, he wants access to the food. He is going into the lady's house to get some of the ingredients he needs.
Right.
He enjoys the kitchen, but later he actually helps Linguini. So through the majority of the movie, he helps Linguini cook, eventually for Linguini. And at some point of the movie, when all the cooks and all the chefs leave because a rat cooking, actually his entire colony comes to help.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to research on rats that shows that beyond their ability to learn and develop and remember and forget, rats show some incredible pro-social behaviors.
Right.
They actually are capable of a helping behavior.
That's so cool.
Research coming from my good friend Inbal Bartal, for instance, had shown that if you take a rat and you put it cage mate in a container and they cannot escape, the free rat will spend the majority of its time trying to associate with their friend. And they both emit some stress calls and they're both obviously stressed.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this research is that at some point, the free rat find a mechanism to open the restrainer and they manage to let their friend out. And the minute they do that, they will always help. They will always release that trapped rat.
Oh, wow.
And they'll do that only if there is a trapped rat. They won't do it if the restrainer is empty or there's just a toy rat in it.
Okay.
They'll release the rat. Yeah. They'll release the trap rat even if the trap rat goes to a completely different area of the cage. So they don't actually get to play. So the rat doesn't get any immediate benefit to themselves. And if they're facing with a choice between two restrainer, one with a rat and one with chocolate chips, and rats really shouldn't eat chocolate chips, but they love chocolate chips.
Oh, wow.
They do taste the sweet. They will open both restrainers at the same rate, so 50-50, which means that the helping behavior is as rewarding as chocolate.
Okay.
And when they do open both restrainers, they always share the chocolate.
Oh.
Which I don't even know if I would have done it. So that is amazing. So in fact, this new research that really expands our knowledge about animals and about rats tells us that rats can sense another rat in trouble or another organism in trouble. And they will try to help, and they will find a way to help, and that helpfulness or the helping behavior is rewarding to them.
Wow.
Which maybe, again, tuning back into the movie, because we really can see Remy do all the things for Linguini, even the part when he's like, Linguini's asleep, but he's still moving him.
Right.
And I think this is really embodies some of the new knowledge we have about rats. And it also makes us think about what is it how do we perceive these animals? Are they really these disease-carrying, dirty, simple animals, or maybe there's more to them?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really, really cool that it seems to me that, and this is maybe a little bit too evolutionary psychology adjacent, and so apologies if it seems rather thin, but it seems to me that prosocial behavior in a species that has a lot of numbers and requires a lot of help to navigate an environment is a really evolutionarily old idea, right? And many of our earliest mammal ancestors, right, as we go back through the eons here to find linkages in our DNA, really is old, and it's ingrained in many animals that we see the connection in, which is why I suppose rats have not been abandoned as an analog in comparative psychology, because they show a lot of similarities to humans. They might not look like humans. They might have extremely different physiologies in the sense that, on the basis of it, of course, right? Different physiologies. We're both mammals. We do the same things, but quite different. Like we don't look like rats. We don't have tails, blah, blah, blah. But we still use them as an analog. And I think that's sort of a testament to they do a lot of things that we observe in ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, we can probably go ahead and assume that they show empathy. And empathy is a complex emotional reaction. Embarrassment is guilt, maybe. These are highly debatable topics in animals. But I think that as our science becomes more advanced and our methodologies become more sophisticated, we can learn a lot more about the similarities and the differences. And again, the neurobiological mechanisms underneath these emotional capacities in animals and in people.
I absolutely agree. And you had mentioned the human-animal interaction. We talked about how Remy controls Linguini, and I wanted to add to that something that hit me while I was watching it, which is Libé's conscious control experiments from, I want to say, good 60, 70 years ago, something like that. So follow me, listener, down this rat hole here, because it wasn't done with rats, but it was done with humans. So Libé had people connected to EEGs, and he found that people had measurable brain activity in their premotor and motor cortexes before they had the idea. 1980s, so not 60, 70 years ago, more like 40 years ago. So the conscious control was not essentially the idea, but rather people are going to make a movement before they are consciously aware of that movement. So it was a whole thing about free will and all of this stuff. More recent research suggests that Libé was not necessarily all there with his conclusions, but I'll save that discussion for another time. The conclusion that he had was that the brain makes the movement before somebody's aware that the movements are being made. And I as soon as I rewatched this movie, I was like, wait a minute, that's kind of like LeBay when Remy's on top of Linguini's head and he's pulling his hair, and this apparently goes through his head into his brain, and it makes the muscle movements, and it felt like that. I know that's probably not it, but of course this is an animated movie, and so it was the spirit, I suppose, of the Libe set of experiments that showed that humans, quote unquote, did not have conscious free will, so to speak. But regardless, I just thought it was an interesting thing to add in here. And then connected to that is Dan Wegner's illusion of conscious control, because Linguini first thinks that he is the one who is controlling his body, or at least he tries to believe that he's the one controlling his body, but it's Remy, and he realizes it's Remy. And the viewer does too. The audience realizes it's Remy, as you mentioned, Shlomit, when a few minutes ago, when you said that Linguini was asleep and he was still moving and he was snoring and all of that, right? And it's the illusion of control, right? So that the classic experiment from Dan Wegner is, don't think of a white elephant, right? Don't think of a white polar bear or whatever it was. I might be conflating two things, but like as soon as you tell someone not to think about something, they're immediately going to think about it. I just saw those two things as we were talking about human and animal interaction. That's like one of the main interactions of the movie, is that Remy is controlling Linguini, and I thought that was a hilarious thing to spot. Shlomit, that I wanted to grab from you. What else did you want to tell the listeners about this film and in your research, or anything that you noted that you thought that you wanted to share?
Yeah. So I think that actually the thing I like the most about the movie is the motto of the movie, which is really the idea that anyone can do whatever they want to do that. And they really shouldn't let anyone define them or stop them. And we are really the only ones who define ourselves.
Yeah.
So really early in the movie, I think Gusteau tells Remy, or I think he's on the TV in that part and he just talks.
Yeah.
But he says, don't let anyone define your limits, no matter where you come from. The only limit is your soul. And that really resonated with me, because we all have things we really want to do and experiences we want to try. And maybe we have a life that we always dreamt to have.
Yeah.
And for some reason, we're not doing it. And that reason is not really the people around us. It may be the money or the time, but
yeah, it mostly is.
It is, I know. But even in a small scale, it says, go ahead and do it and try it.
Yeah.
And the fact that the one who tries it is a rat, which has a bad reputation and is small and is a simple, relatively supposed to be a simple organism, really pushes us to, or at least tries to push us to think, even on a daily basis, like, am I doing what I really want to do? Am I being who I really want to be? Is there any way for me to explore my creativity and my imagination and just try?
Yeah.
And I think this is such an important theme that we sometimes fail or neglect to think about in our everyday life, and stop for a minute and say, wait, am I where I want to be? And if not, how can I get there?
Yeah. That's beautiful. I like that message. Well, I want to thank Dr. Shlomit Flaisher-Grinberg for joining me to discuss Ratatouille. Before we say goodbye, Shlomit, is there anything that you'd like to share to plug, where can folks find more about your work?
Things I want to share and plug. If you go to San Francisco University website and you Google the longest last name at the university, you'll find me. If you're a lot of my current work right now actually has transitioned from the work with rats to the work with shelter animals.
Okay.
So
very
actually
cool.
in the last, I love it. In the last couple of years, I realized that teaching or training rats in my classroom is fun, but I literally breed rats for the classroom while shelters are full of animals who can really benefit from training, behavioral rehabilitation, socialization. So in my QN classes, my students train shelter cats and shelter dogs.
Yeah.
They work a lot on socialization and just training for adaptive behaviors like walking on a leash and nail cutting and going to the vet, and also help these animals get adopted.
Yeah.
So I believe that if you are interested in the transition of traditional research with learning of rats into a little bit of more of its current cultural, societal impact, this may be something that may be interesting.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of my current work is on the behavior of shelter animals, the perception of them, and also our ability to use our classroom, our college classroom, to benefit animals in the society through our psychological knowledge.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to talk to you off mic about this, because that sounds amazing, actually, and I think quite a few of my students would love to do that, and I teach learning, so I wonder if we could do that as a project.
It's very rewarding, and you can break it down to small pieces. You don't have to do like a whole.
Right. Yeah. I'm gonna definitely find out more about this. But you did in our notes write down something that's coming up. What is coming up?
My neurocinema course.
I'm so excited.
For many years, I've been dreaming to teach this course, and it is inspired by a lot of work, for instance, by yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's a new course. It is an elective. It's a part of our core curriculum. And my hope is to not only introduce students to neuroscience, it's a freshman, first semester, first year course, but also to really think about the way that cinema or media not only reflects themes in our society, but it also constructs our thoughts and the way that we behave.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I had to choose movies, and I found out that this is probably the hardest task I'm going to deal with this summer, because I had to narrow down about 50 movies I wanted to talk about.
50? Wow.
50. I probably will have to do like 8.
Okay.
Realistically.
Yeah.
Or I may have to do a little bit of how you do it and just teach like multiple semesters and choose different movies maybe for every semester.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am so excited to finally share all these amazing movies with my students and connect it to neuroscience and connect it to their profession and their interest and their daily lives, and just have fun.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I want to take this as a freshman at St. Francis University. Oh my goodness. Yes, I've been in a similar position to you. When I first started at Eureka, I developed a course that I taught over the summer, and I have not been able to teach it since then.
Wow.
Because of my normal rotation, although I'm going to see if I can squeeze it into a semester somehow. But it was just the psychology of film. And I definitely struggled with which movie to put where. And this was, so you're narrowing it down just to the neuroscience, right? Which 50 movies is a lot. And that's because there's so much, especially on the myth side, right?
Yeah.
But I struggled because it was going to be multidisciplinary as far as the subdisciplines of psychology goes, right? So I needed to narrow down which movies in social, which movies in cognitive, which movies in blah, so on and so forth. And yeah, it was probably the most of the planning that I did for that. And of course, it was only like a 4-week. It was only like a 4-week course. So I think I ended up doing like 1 movie a week or something like that, from a big set down to 4. Yeah. So I definitely hear you on that one. Well, I really appreciate you joining me to discuss Ratatouille. Thank you again, Shlomit.
Thank you, Alex.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Until the next one, thanks for listening.